And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Marcia Daszko. Marcia is a catalyst for strategic leadership, transformation, and innovation. She helps leaders challenge their thinking to realize results never before achieved. She has taught graduate management and marketing classes at 6 universities across the US. She's the author of Survival is Optional, and she is a protege of Dr. Edward Deming, which, if you don't know who he is, look him up because he is the godfather of purpose, if you will. It's probably better ways to say that, but a very impressive and influential figure in the world of business today. But anyway, thank you for joining us today, Marcia. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Peter, for having me. And I'll make a short modification. Many of my articles and my speeches are called Survival is Optional, but the new book, that leadership transformation book that we just released, is called Pivot, Disrupt, Transform: How Leaders Beat the Odds and Survive. So that's a new edition.
Got it. Got it. That's the new book. I'm sorry. I've got
Yes, no problem.
outdated bio here. But anyway, here we are. So you've been at this for quite a long time. And when I say at this, I'm talking about, being a thought leader, being an author, being a speaker. Tell me a little bit about how, sort of from your perspective, what's changed? What's different about the business side of content and thought leadership today than, say, 10 years ago?
It's interesting. I would say so. I've been consulting in this arena of leadership transformation for now over 25 years. My first career was in marketing, and then I moved into working for a consulting firm, and it was Dr. Perry Gluckman and Dr. Deming who mentored me, and I learned. But what I'm seeing as the differences over the past 10, 20 years is a difference in openness to learning, openness to transform, not just change, because change is too easy to change one way and change back, but then to have the courage to do things differently. There are, of course, people who are innovators that you couldn't stop them if you tried, but that is what we're just, even my executive clients have said to me, Marcia, what you're teaching us, why didn't we not know this before? And I say, it's not taught in schools. And then what you find in companies or organizations is so many management fads and best practices heaped on top of each other. And that's the issue.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So openness, that's a good thing. So they're more open to sort of hearing and dealing with transformation than they were, say, 15 years ago, 10 years ago? Is that?
Great leaders are open to new learning. And that's what is actually declining, because, and how it shows up is, for example, in the Silicon Valley Bay Area right now, we have more than 6,000 startups. We anticipate more than 90% of those will fail. Likewise, we can look at the Fortune 500 companies, and the first list of Fortune 500 companies that came out in about 1955, more than 60% of them no longer exist. So can you imagine that, let's say in a year or 5 years, Google, IBM, Walmart, Exxon would disappear? And that's what we see. We see huge companies disappearing. Why is that happening? It's because leaders aren't really thinking the way they need to think in order to transform themselves and their organizations.
Got it. So that being the case, what's the opportunity that brings to someone like you or other of our listeners, authors, thought leaders, and speakers, to help organizations deal with speed and change and cannibalization and technology and AI, like all the stuff that are the underlying sort of causes of these companies being sort of, 90% failure rate, et cetera. So where's the opportunity in that?
Peter, you hit the nail on the head right there, because there are multiple causes, and so many executives want to look at one or two causes and then go figure out who to judge and who to blame for the problems or the issues or the decline. Instead, great leaders are systems thinkers. They focus on optimizing their organization as a system, and part of their system is also their vendors and their customers and the bigger society. But also, they have to have statistical knowledge, theory of variation, theory of psychology, so that they are not focused on incentivizing and motivating people. That is old thinking. New thinking is creating an environment where people are self-motivated and not doing the carrot and stick approach, but instead it's a foundational, find joy in learning, find joy in working together, respect those basics. But it takes a new way of thinking, and that means that the executive teams have to provoke their own thinking. They have to challenge all of the beliefs, assumptions, and quote unquote current best practices and management fads that their organizations are full of, but they don't see them because it's the system they live in. So for the consultants or advisors, their greatest value to an executive team is they see what the executives can't see because they come in from outside of the system, and they ask them really tough questions. They provoke their thinking, and they ask them questions that they've never been asked before, and then they help them emerge a new kind of leadership.
Got it. So give me some specific examples or recommendations for folks that are like you that are out there. How do they shape their solutions to meet the needs of the clients that are suffering from this, right? So you've got, your methodology and your processes and such are to help clients alleviate the pressure and the pain of this change and find a sort of new way of leadership. What does that look like? So obviously you have a book, right? You do speaking. What are the ways that you can deploy solutions, and what are the ways that you would recommend thought leaders and authors think about sort of shaping their solutions to meet the needs of this sort of changing and perplexed leadership world?
I think it begins with executives finding people that will really provoke their thinking. So asking questions and then having them read or study things that they've never studied before and think about things they've never thought about before. So for example, I do start out with my executive teams, and I tell them, we're going to read books. We're going to do book reports. And they laugh. They think I'm teasing, but I'm not, because they need to, first and foremost, learn together something different that they've never thought about before, because I need them to become provocative and become stronger, but with new knowledge.
And I would imagine some of the things you're having them look at, because these are smart people, they're well read, but it's outside of what they would normally be doing, right? It's outside of their industry or their functional domain or whatever the case may be. Could you give an example of real client situation? You said to them, here's our homework assignment, here's our book report, go read this.
Yes. So because there are thousands and thousands of leadership books out there that say, okay, the top traits and blah, blah, blah. That's all
Yep.
nice. But I have them start reading The Goal. That's the first one. That book has been around for decades.
Okay.
And many of them have never read it. And once they do, they get huge ahas. Like, oh my gosh. And then they start using the language of, where do we find bottlenecks in our organization? So another book that I have them look at is Profit Beyond Measure by Tom Johnson. It is a different way to look at the bottom line, the profits, the numbers, and they need to take their focus off of the numbers, which is really shocking for them, because I say, I want you to look at the numbers, but when you're used to getting together and talking about budgets and forecasts and so forth at a 2-day offsite, and that's where you spend 99% of your time, I want you to take 99% of your time, put it focused on what is your compelling purpose for your organization? Who is your customer and how do you know them? And what do they need currently? And what do you anticipate in the future? By what method will you accomplish that? That is 99% of the conversation. Then you can look at the systems that you need and processes you need to create and the leadership that you need to invest in your people to develop them.
Got
Then you can look at the numbers. So many of my clients now they spend, if they're lucky, 30 minutes focusing on numbers because that's the result. If they don't do the other 99% of everything well, their results won't be good. So they need to focus on what they're doing and why they're doing it, for whom they're doing it, and then they can look at the results.
Got it. So I want to pivot for a little bit to the business side of your world, right? So you have lots of plates that you're spinning, writing and speaking and advising and all that. Could you walk us through sort of the various activities that you're doing and then sort of bucket them into these are the things I do for sort of branding or awareness or just because I enjoy them, and then these are sort of the lines of business that I have underneath that.
Okay. My foundation has been consulting for 25 years. And through all of that, I've been writing, and whether it's articles and now the book, and through that I've been teaching MBA classes, and through that when I'm invited to speak at conferences or at corporate events, I've been doing that. So I think my foundation has been the consulting, and everything else has been fun and gravy. And now that I have the book, Pivot, Disrupt, Transform, I really want to get out there more and be speaking to more groups of people at conferences and in corporations and so forth, because I want to get this message out there. That is why I wrote the book, because I see so many executive teams or leaders struggling and floundering and failing, and they don't need to do that. It's like they're at a fork in the road, and
Yep.
if they grab onto the best practices and management fads, which everybody does because that's what everybody else is doing, that's the negative direction they'll take. But instead, if they challenge everything that they do, they think about what is it that we want to accomplish together for our customers. Everything has to be linked to customers. Too often, people forget about the customers. They're the afterthought.
And they're kind of important to
Yeah,
say.
really. I think with all my travels, I wish that the airlines would remember the customers sometimes.
Yeah, well, they right. I think they confuse customer for cargo because I hear you on that tonight.
Oh, you've got
Uh,
it right. You've got it.
yeah,
Nailed it.
I want to spend the last couple minutes we have together here talking about speaking because speaking is always a topic that comes up. I want to either start to speak, do more speaking, speak strategically, speak more, speak less. It's sort of or stop or I'm tired. I don't want to talk to anybody. Right? From your experience, share with us, if you will, sort of how you use speaking in terms of getting the message out, getting people to find you, what the challenges are, what's working. Give me sort of just your take on the sort of the speaking world for a couple of moments.
Well, that's a great question. And I don't think I have the great answers, because people say to me, they run across me, they hear me speak somewhere, and or most of my business has always come by referral. So when I'm working with a client, for example, they'll say to me, after a year or so, Marcia, how would I have found you? And I kind of just shrug my shoulders, because I can't take out an ad in the Wall Street Journal for $180,000
Right.
for a full page, things like that. So it is so much by, word of mouth, and just also trying to, get the word out there that there's a different, better way to lead people and accomplish what you want to accomplish and succeed and be happy in the world. And so that's a big reason why I wrote the book, to open doors. Also, it's so that I can hand it out and say, here, this might be of help. And then from that, speaking invitations have been evolving. I think, that's the path I'll go on and transition a little bit more into the speaking world and maybe a little bit less in the consulting world. It doesn't matter. It's all my
Yep.
passion to help leaders transform themselves and their organizations so they'll be happier and can make a difference in the world.
That's great. So finally, given that your book is fairly new, share with us just briefly your experience in writing the book and then in this sort of launch phase. What could you share with us?
Actually, the writing the book was not that difficult. It's a lot of stories that bring up the points, and I broke the book into 3 sections: what leaders first have to stop doing, and if they want to start doing new things, the problem is if they don't stop doing their old practices and their old thinking, it's like putting new strawberry jam on moldy bread.
That's
So
okay.
I want them to throw away the moldy bread and then start
Got
fresh. So they have to start thinking different. And in the book, I share with them the new ways to think different and the knowledge that they need to learn about that they haven't learned in their MBA programs, in school, in their or from any of their managers or mentors as they built their careers. They just haven't learned this same thing. And then they learn how to transform themselves and their organizations. It's like the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, and then they'll never go back to doing the old way of thinking.
Got it.
So they'll never go back to doing performance appraisals where they judge and rank and rate and criticize people. They'll never do that because that's hurtful for their heart and for people. They won't hold individuals accountable for the results of a system.
Yep, got it. Great. Well, thank you for sharing all that you've shared with us today and your experiences and your perspectives. I think it's been pretty helpful. I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Peter. This has been fun.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.